I grew up as a painter, I suppose, a drawer. I was, from an early age, I was one of those kids who had an easel in his bedroom and sat in, I was a bit weird. By the time I got to art, I went to art, my first art college was in Mansfield College of Art, where I did a foundation, coming from Nottingham, where I was born. And there was a photography tutor on that course called Chris Locke, very fine landscape photographer. And I think he must have been quite a strong influence looking back. And I sort of honed in on photography, but didn't let go of drawing and painting. So when I arrived in Sheffield in '78 to do fine art and photography at Salter Lane, Sheffield Polytechnic, I was very interested in the sort of fusion of photography and drawing and painting. Landscape photography was such a big thing at that time in that fine art context, in that place, at that college. So you have people like Thomas Joshua Cooper and Paul Hill and Ray Moore, all these photographers coming through. And I think also Sheffield itself, being on the edge of the peak, and just the topographical nature of Sheffield just got a hook into me, I think. And by the time I left college, I'd sort of arrived at a way of photographing that merged all those interests. So it was essentially landscape photography. But at that stage, it was basically pictures of muddy ground. I worked in quarries and in old industrial sites, but I was interested in was all the marks and relics that were left on the ground by humans. I worked with those marks in the pictures almost as if I was drawing them, really. And that work became what I called groundwork, which I produced an exhibition that was on an Impressions Gallery in York in the early 80s, and then at the Axiom Centre for the Arts down in Cheltenham, amongst a few other places. And I think by that time, landscape had just completely got its hook into me. But it was a very, very, very fine art sort of approach. It was about marks and aesthetics and shade and tone and all those things. And being very, very fussy about, because of course shooting on film then, so the way the grain of the film worked with the marks and was rendered on the paper was all fundamentally important to me. So after college, I then got involved in the Untitled Gallery, and one of the earliest shows was John Davis's show, and I was just surrounded by people doing lots of different stuff. The Industrial Valley series, I don't really know where it started, but I was out in the Don Valley doing my mark-making pictures, and there was a point at which I stood back a bit and took a wider view of the valley with this stuff in it that was of interest to me. And I spent a couple of years, I think, just traveling the valley from, basically it worked from, although it wasn't shot chronologically, I worked from basically Tinsley Viaduct, Blackburn Meadows just beyond Tinsley Viaduct, right through to up to Hillsborough. I was hugely influenced in the early 80s by a photographer called Joe Deal, who was one of the new topographics, a big groundbreaking exhibition that happened in America and toured over here. In fact, I've got a poster of that exhibition on my studio wall. And Joe Deal did a very simple thing. He took a very high vantage point and he got rid of the horizon. He just, scale and everything just started to go all over the place, just examining the surface of the earth, if you like. And it was that surface that I was interested in, and often very frustrated that you can't get the vantage point to get, you know. So I started using a longer lens and playing about with it. But that whole series basically came out of that the exploration of, they're probably the most landscape pictures, certainly the most documentary type pictures I've ever produced. I bought my first digital camera, which I think was 2003, 2004, something like that. I didn't want to pick up exactly where I left off, so I chose, I said, right, well, I'm going to photograph trees. That's what I'm going to do. And I started photographing woodland. But again, what I soon realised was that it was that whole thing about mark making and structure and was still there. In fact, it became even more intense. So the work ended up becoming sort of photographic pollocks. And I'd not really looked at the work since until a few years back. I had a quiet summer, and I spent the summer going back through all the old negatives of that sequence and scanning them all and re-exploring them, and really getting quite excited by them again, which is great after so long. And also that you get that wonderful thing where you think, how the hell did I miss that one? Very early on, I started to strive to make images that could sit on a wall and you could live with for a while, and they'd almost work on drip feed. So, you know, there is an immediate sort of aesthetic structure to a picture that attracts you, some more structured than others. But what I enjoy, the pictures I enjoy of my own the most are the ones that I've got pictures where I still look at them and spot new things, and I love that. I love the exploration of the fact. In fact, I've got one of my large pictures on the wall here, and I think I made that image in 2011, and it's on my studio wall, and I'm still looking at it, spotting little bits I hadn't noticed before, and I really enjoy that. And I think that's, if you compare it's been interesting looking at the Industrial Valley work, because I can see a direct correlation to what I'm doing now, because the prints are a lot smaller and tighter, but they're still doing the same thing. I mean, my images now are quite large and very highly detailed, but the reason I've done that is because I can. So that sort of quality was just completely, hardly anybody was doing that. It was very, very, very expensive and technically very difficult. Now with digital photography, these images are made up of 30 images stitched together, so the resolution is very, very high, and I can go very big, and that rendition of the detail and all those little bits that will keep you fascinated, it just gets more and more. Some of my favourite images of my own are the ones that are so laid back, you've got to work, you've got to really look at them, and eventually stuff will start to reveal itself.